answer session following the public meeting of the review of the U.S. Human Spaceflight Plans Committee here in Cocoa Beach, Florida. We'll start this session off with comments from the committee's chairman, Norman Augustine, and then we'll open it up for questions. Chairman Augustine?
Well, thank you. In the way of background, our committee was set up by the White House to take a review of the human spaceflight program in this country and to examine what its future should be. We have 10 members on the committee. We've had 90 days for our project. We have 33 days remaining, which means that we'll have a final report ready to go to the printer on August 31st, and we're on schedule. Needless to say, we've all been working very hard. This week we've been in Houston, Huntsville, and here, and we've had the chance to hear briefings by NASA, by many other organizations, and we're at the point now that we're beginning to formulate some conclusions, but by and large have not yet come to final conclusions. So we won't do that until next week in Washington. At that time, we'll begin to resolve some of these open issues. The reason that we have not yet come to final conclusions are really twofold. One is that under the law, we are required to deliberate in public about these observations before we come to conclusions. And secondly, we have divided our work up into 3 parts and 3 subcommittees to make it more manageable for us. And the work of the 3 committees has to be integrated, which we have not yet done. So that's where we stand, making good progress. It's a very difficult challenge that we've been given, and we take the task very seriously. So I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone might care to raise.
Okay, please wait for the microphone, and then, of course, your name and news affiliation, and we'll start for simplicity's sake on this side and work our way across.
Duggins, National Public Radio and WMFE. Sir, you heard a pretty impassioned plea this morning from Lieutenant Governor Kottkamp regarding the safeguarding of jobs in Florida, which I'm sure you're hearing from many states. Would you care to comment on it now?
I'd be happy to do that. We have been asked to provide options, which I assume the President will use to make a decision and to provide a proposal to the Congress. The options that we will be assessing, will be compared using different figures of merit. One of the figures of merit is overall employment. Another figure of merit is maintaining critical skills. And critical skills doesn't just mean rocket scientists. It also means people, for example, who can weld aluminum, lithium, or whatever. But those will be parameters that we will provide insight on. How much weight the President cares to apply to each of those is entirely beyond our job grade, but we'll provide the basic information.
Yes, Dan Billow from WESH-TV. Can I just get your take on some of the recommendations made by the subcommittee in terms of destinations? You know, some of them very ambitious, going to Mars. How does that strike you? Is that too far a reach?
There's a real challenge, kind of a dilemma here, in the sense that there's a discontinuity in terms of both cost and time in terms of the destination one picks. And the reason for that is that you can't go 60% of the way to Mars if you only have 60% of the money. And similarly, there are no interesting planets along the way to Mars, so you can't go part way and visit something. You get a long time till you get to your destination of interest. And the result of that is that the options that we've been able to identify, there tend to be some very interesting ones that more or less fit today's budget as the President has defined it, but they don't permit you to do some of these really inspiring things like go to Mars and so on. On the other end, we felt obliged to provide some very inspiring options, but they substantially exceed today's budgets. And so we'll offer, I don't know how many, probably 5 or so, half a dozen options that go all the way from fitting within the budget to very aggressive programs. And we'll provide assessments of each with regard to risk and the benefit, and we'll see what the President decides.
Todd Halverson of Florida Today. I've been really interested in the discussion about launch vehicles. It's largely been about cost and schedule, and the Columbia Accident Investigation Board recommended strongly that crew safety be top priority in the design of the next vehicle over cost and schedule. So I'm wondering, how will crew safety, cost, and schedule be weighted in your deliberations as well as the options you present to the President?
It's a good question, and the reason that we didn't spend a lot of time on crew safety today is that when we were in Houston and in Huntsville, we devoted a major part of our time to that subject. The one discussion that you did hear today was a discussion of the analytical tools that are available for calculating safety and reliability. And as you heard, many of us who've been in this business a long time are very skeptical of the analytical tools. They tend to be very optimistic. We know very well the safety basis of the existing systems that we use, or the reliability of the expendables. The way we will weigh that is that we put #1 priority on safety. You have to meet a certain safety threshold, or one can't even consider the system. I can't define a 3-digit threshold because I wouldn't believe it if I did. But I also realize that the only safe way to have a space program is to sit on the ground with a telescope. And so I don't like to use the word compromise, but there is risk. There's risk involved in anything we do in space. But safety will be our highest priority concern.
Hi, Phil Keating, Fox News. The last couple of days at these public hearings, news has been made by the commission members. #1, suggesting there's no way we're going to make 2015 getting the Orion to the ISS. No way we're going to make 2020 getting to the moon. Sounds like the commission may be leading towards giving the option to the president that maybe we should just take Mars in particular off the table. Might you also do the same about going back to the moon? I mean, it sounds like the budgetary situation is really hampering what you can recommend.
The budget clearly is at this point driving the program without question. At the same time, we are going to offer a series of options that are all interesting in terms of their accomplishment. They will involve different amounts of money, but as I said, there is sort of a dead spot where you go from today's kind of budget to substantially greater than today's budget without a lot of options in between. And some of the options will involve going to Mars. Some of the options will bypass the moon and go to Mars. But there will be at least one option that does go to Mars, and probably more, in fact. The reason for bypassing the moon, though, would have less to do with economics than it would with schedule, and with the argument that many people make that we've been to the moon, we've seen the moon, and why not get on and do something new? Countering that argument are those who say that there's science yet to be done on the moon. The moon is a great place to train to go to Mars. You could get back from the moon in a couple days, and you may take a year to get back from Mars, depending on where you are if you have a problem. So those are kind of the pros and cons, but probably each will be on the table still.
You have Donald Forbes, WKMG. You've been listening to this for 60 some odd days. You got another 30 days to make a decision. Are you leaning, the main thing you heard today from the Space Coast was gap. Are you leaning one way or the other about extending the shuttle life beyond 2010?
The gap, of course, refers to the time from the completion of the shuttle flights until the beginning of whatever follows it, presumably Constellation. Ares 1, and during that period of time, the only way we can put astronauts into space is to buy tickets on a Russian launch vehicle, and there are many who find that objectionable, of course. It's a very hard gap to close. The only way to close it that I know of is to continue to operate the shuttle. If you continue to operate the shuttle and get no more money than you have today, then you basically have to shut down the advanced space program of the future. you could frankly forget about Ares 5, you can probably forget about Mars, at least for many, many years. On the other hand, if you don't continue shuttle and you live with the gap, you can begin to build the groundwork for a rather exciting space program in the future. And that's the tough trade, not a trade we have to make. The President will have to make that trade, but we'll provide the options that he can make that trade.
Okay, another 5 minutes or so.
James Dan from Florida Today. Can you give us a sense of the range of budget numbers that you're talking about when you're going from the current president's budget to something significantly greater? And are you talking about, an immediate ramp up there, or over a 10+ year long-term kind of period?
We're looking at a 10-year period, and we're obviously trying to find profiles that don't cause great disruption, that makes sense from a technical standpoint. But the current budget during that period of time is somewhere around $80 billion for this purpose. And we'll be looking at options that are consistent with that. We'll be looking at options that are probably substantially more.
Hi, Rory O'Neill with Westwood One Radio. You've been focusing on this for 2 months. Obviously, your career gives you quite a background on topics that are being discussed. I'm just curious, do you actually learn anything from these hearings that you've had the past couple of days? There are arguments I'm sure you've heard before.
Absolutely. You're right. Most of us have spent our careers in space and space issues. And we've heard a lot of the arguments, but you get new pieces of data, you get different perspectives. And I would venture to say that we tried to come in with an open mind, but we're humans. We obviously had our beliefs when we came in. And I would venture to say that every one of us has changed our mind on at least one or two critical issues, and some of us have changed our minds twice even on some of those issues. And we do benefit greatly from these discussions. And of course, we have a lot of material that's provided to our subcommittees that I've divided our total group into. A lot of very detailed technical discussions. And one of the interesting things here is that there are the big picture issues. Should we go to Mars or the moon or not at all? But there's also, to make this make sense, you've got to understand the details. You have to understand the long-term impact of galactic cosmic rays on the human body. You have to know that the hook height at the Michoud plant is 33 feet above the floor of the factory. And it goes all the way from the very grand to the very detailed. And so, yes, we're learning a lot as we go along.
Kevin Spear with the Orlando Sentinel. If we could go back to the issue of the workforce here, how will your recommendations to the President take shape when it comes to what to do about the workforce? And related to that, have you had or will you have a kind of full-fledged panel discussion on the merits of the workforce and how to retain or not to retain it?
Yes, we are not designing any option with the idea in mind of preserving or not preserving the workforce. We're starting out with what are useful things to do in space. So why would you conduct a space program? And those go all the way, of course, from performing science to establishing national leadership to involving international cooperation to inspiring young people and so on. And we start with that. We go to destinations. What destinations serve that purpose? What kind of program? And then falling out of that is the cost and the workforce implications, risks, and so forth. So workforce is clearly a strong parameter associated with each of the options that we'll define, but we're not going to specifically design options that match a given workforce. That's really something that could be done quite readily if that's one of the objectives.
We have time for about one more question, so any pressing last questions? Anyone? Hands up. That gets it.
Todd Halverson of Florida Today. Do any of your beyond Earth orbit scenarios fit in the presidential budget, the 2010 budget? Is there any scenario that goes beyond Earth orbit for that money?
answer to that, unfortunately, has to be qualified a bit. It depends on what you do with the space shuttle. Do you continue to operate it? It depends on whether you continue to operate the International Space Station. And it depends on how soon you want to go to beyond Earth orbit. And so I think the way I would answer that, and I want to caution that we still have homework to do in this area, but if you really do a hard stop on the shuttle and a hard stop on ISS, there is money probably left to conduct a relatively conservatively paced, if you will, relatively slow beyond Earth orbit program. If you don't do those two first things, then the beyond Earth orbit program is slipped well into the future.
May I ask one quick question? It'll be a quick answer too. The ISS, it's 83% complete, and what I'm hearing is that there's no plan by the world community that's been involved in space exploration to make sure that this is going to be serviceable for decades in the future. I mean, it seems like we're on the verge of completing it and then abandoning it all in a very short number of years. Is that really what the plan is, or what's it going to take?
The plan as it exists today, as I understand it, is that the ISS would be shut down early in fiscal year 2015. And one of the things I guess I learned in economics was that you don't make future decisions based on sunk costs. You look at the marginal future benefit and the marginal future cost and make decisions. So although it certainly weighs heavily on all of us as human beings, the fact we spent a lot of money on ISS, that alone doesn't argue for its continuation. Having said that, I would emphasize there are some very good arguments for its continuation, other than the fact we spent a lot of money on it. And so that's something that we will certainly provide to the President. What are some of the benefits? There are important benefits, but there are costs that go with it. For example, subject to refinement and subject to a lot of caveats, to continue that ISS for another 5 years probably costs another $14 billion. And that's $14 billion that you can't spend on Ares or on Orion. So unless there's additional money added to the program, then there's some very tough trade-offs to be made.
Okay, that really is all the time we have. For more information about the review of U.S. Human Spaceflight Plans Committee, please visit hsf.nasa.gov. Thank you.
Thank you.